peritoneal cavity. That one is a very small idea compared to everything else. The reason why is, as long as you can kind of remember what the serosa is in general. So the serosa, you get 3 examples, and all of them all started with P. Peritoneum is the last one. So you have the pericardium, you have the pleura, and then the very last one is going to be your peritoneum. And so whatever you know about the serosa already, we're going to take that knowledge and we're going to apply it to this context with the peritoneum, which shouldn't take a whole lot of time, okay? Then you have the 2 major big ideas, because we have the organs of the digestive system that are categorized into 2 main groups. You have the ones of what's called the alimentary canal. So we've got the alimentary canal organs. The alimentary canal organs, I'm not going to list them here because this part you should have gotten in Thursday for LAT. And if you didn't get it in Thursday, Tuesday you are going to definitely get it today. Okay, so we're not going to dwell a long time on what those alimentary canal organs, but basically where we're starting, we are going from the mouth and we are going all the way to the anus. And so every single organ that the food is actually going to be physically in, that is what the alimentary canal is. And so that means that there are certain layers to that canal that's going to end up changing. And so under alimentary canal, I'm going to put layered or layers. So knowing the layers that are going to be characteristic of every single part of the alimentary canal. And so this is all having to do with the organs that food is physically in. Then you have the accessory organs. The accessory organs, so accessory digestive organs. So I'm going to put in a different color the accessory organs. These are the ones that may not necessarily be in contact with food, except for the very start where the mouth is concerned. So that's going to include your teeth and your salivary glands. Those are really the only accessory organs that are going to be associated or in contact with food. So you've got your teeth and tongue. You've got your salivary glands. And then you have the really big ones when it comes to the small intestine. Okay? You have the liver. Not liver. Okay, liver and gallbladder and the pancreas. Okay? As the accessory organs, again, they are going to be producing something or doing something with the digestion of food without necessarily being in contact with food. So that's an important thing about the accessory organs. So we're going to start with peritoneum. We are going to go all the way down through the alimentary canal, and then we're going to talk about the accessory organs as appropriate as we're going down the alimentary canal. How many of you saw that there is a discussion post that's going to be due? I see 2 hands up. When is the discussion post due? Next week. Before Thanksgiving. Before Thanksgiving. Everybody got that? Okay, so this is what we're going to do today as we're going through this. You're going to start taking notes for what you're going to put in that discussion post. The way you do that is, I want you to think of the following, because everyone will have a different journey, okay? I want you to be thinking of what goes on with your carbs. Starches, sugars, pasta, bread, okay? That is going to have a different journey than your proteins, the meats, anything that is, let's see, nuts, anything that you can think of that is protein, okay? Cheese, there's protein in there as well, all right? Speaking of cheese, what's the last macromolecule that we have to be able to break down? Fats. If you think of them all as three, it's going to become overwhelming. So what I want you to do is, and you're going to be crafting your post as you're doing it, right? One of the things that you have to do is you have to talk amongst your group and communicate with each other and let each other know which one you are going to take on for that discussion post. So in other words, for each post, I'm expecting to see somebody from the group is going to talk about carbohydrates and the journey of carbohydrates. Another person from the group is going to talk about the journey of protein. And then the third person of the group is going to talk about the journey of fats. And so when I'm talking about the journey, I'm talking about the digestive journey. And I'll just tell you something right now. Carbs, proteins, and fats, the majority of the digestion that happens to all of them is going to be in the small intestine. So mouth, yes, that's important. Esophagus, there's really nothing being digested in there. Stomach, okay, proteins. Small intestine, all three of them. Large intestine, nothing much left to digest. So for the most part, your posts are just gonna go through the small intestine and not go any further than that. Because that's where most of your digestion should have already finished, is in the small intestine. So even though it may seem like a huge, huge task, it's actually going to be, hopefully, not so bad. Because you're only going to be spending a lot of time in only certain organs, okay? So this is the big picture that I want you to start with today, and then we're gonna go on through. All right. So the peritoneum, starting with the peritoneum and the peritoneal cavity, what we're going to do right now, we're just going to fill in the blanks without spending a lot of time on it, but whatever idea that you have of the pleura and the pericardium and any other serous membrane, we're going to take those ideas and we're going to apply it to our third concept here. Okay, the blank peritoneum versus the blank peritoneum. The blank peritoneum is the part of that peritoneum that actually surrounds the digestive organ. What are the two parts of any serosal membrane? Visceral and parietal. Okay, so visceral was always describing what? What do you think? Which one is visceral? One of them is visceral. Surrounds the organ itself or lines the body wall? Is that visceral? Or which is parietal? Which one is visceral? This first one is visceral because it's actually surrounding, it's physically touching the digestive organs. This is going to be continuous with a layer of the alimentary canal called the serosa. And so the serosa is one of the outermost layer of the alimentary canal. And then that one I have it as kind of color-coded as a light blue for that very reason, because it is a continuation of this. And of course, the parietal peritoneum is the one that lines the body wall. And just like as before with our serosal membranes, there's going to be some kind of a potential space that is going to exist between them that allows for us to, let's see, there's peritoneal fluid in it. It allows for the digestive organs to kind of move against this membrane without generating a lot of friction, okay? And so just as before, we have the double membrane, and then there's going to be some peritoneal fluid, some serosal fluid that is in there, okay? Don't forget your other serous membrane, since I've mentioned it already. This is one of those that could possibly be asked about in your semi-cumulative part of the final exam. So again, with the semi-cumulative part, if it's an idea that shows up more than once throughout the course, then it's likely something that I really want you to know, okay? And the serous membranes is what I want you to know. We can take that peritoneum, though, and we can divide it into different pieces of the peritoneum. Unlike the pleura and the pericardium, this is going to be the most complex of the three, but I don't want you to memorize every single color that is in here. Please do not memorize every single color. I'm just going to highlight just a few features of the peritoneum, okay? All right. Between the three of them, what makes it complicated is that we do have an additional part to it besides simply visceral and parietal. There is going to be little membranes that are almost like bridges between the parietal and the visceral, okay? So I'm just gonna kind of give you an idea based on what you may already know. do you notice that there is an orange here, and an orange here, and an orange here? The one that actually physically touches the organ itself. That's what we call our visceral peritoneum, right? The parietal was the one that was supposed to line the body wall. Which is this. And this. That's the parietal peritoneum. However, you will notice that those organs are anchored to the body wall by these little bridges of peritoneum. Those are neither visceral nor parietal. So we're going to assign a different name to them. And we're going to call that mesentery. Mesentery is the double layer of peritoneum that anchors the digestive organs to the body wall. That is something that our other serous membranes did not have. So they hold the organs in place, they store fat, they also provide routes for blood vessels and for nerves. It's all of these little bridges. But this is kind of a simple representation. In reality, this is what those bridges will look like. And recall, by the way, what does it mean to be peritoneal versus retroperitoneal? Retroperitoneal means behind peritoneum. So there are certain organs that are going to exist behind the peritoneum that are not encased in this. Classic example of that one would be both of your kidneys. Your kidneys are your retroperitoneal organs. So let's look at that mesentery. We're going to take this, this, and this, and we're going to expand it into something a little bit more complex. These are the mesentery examples that I want you to know. Lesser omentum and greater omentum. I'm going to point them out to you right now. When you were doing your cat dissections, you likely would have encountered these. Lesser omentum is this sheet of mesentery that attaches to the stomach and then posteriorly to where the liver is. That's the lesser omentum. The greater omentum, if you remember, the greater omentum is, how many of you recall seeing there's this sheet of mesentery in the front covering the small and large intestine? And if you didn't see it in the cat, you would have seen it in the torso model. How many of you kind of can picture that? It looked like an apron of fat, but it wasn't fat.
Oh, it was yellow.
It was yellow. It's always yellow. No matter where you see it, it's typically yellow. In real life and in models, it's yellow. That is the mesentery that is going to be covering the front. We're going to call that mesentery the greater omentum. So that's the lesser omentum, that's the greater omentum, and in this image, what we've done with the greater omentum, we've lifted it up like an apron, and we've exposed some of the other mesentery that is here. So, lesser omentum I want you to recognize, greater omentum I want you to recognize. The mesocolon is also what I want you to recognize. Mesocolon is the one that is directly attached to our large intestine, and then the last one is going to be the mesentery proper. The mesentery proper are all of those sheets that are in between the small intestine. So when you had taken out the small intestine, notice that it did not come out as just one long organ. They were all attached to each other by this sheet, okay, that looked kind of like a membrane that was attaching all of that. That is what we call the mesentery proper. Mesentery proper. And these are the only 4 mesentery examples that I do want you to know as part of it. Now that we've gone over our peritoneum, now we're going to talk about the green, and we're going to go into the maroon. We're going to start with an overview of the digestive system. Alimentary canal, we're going to fill in some blanks here. That represents our green. And then the accessory digestive organs, that's going to represent what is in maroon. So let's fill in the blanks with some of them. We go from the blank to the blank to the esophagus. We start with the oral cavity. Those of you who attended Thursday's lab, you can fill in the blanks already with this one. Tuesday we are going to get it, but it's always good to jump ahead and look at the stuff that's ahead, especially as we're finishing up. Okay, oral cavity. So oral cavity pretty much meeting the mouth. And then we are going to end up going into the throat, but I don't want you to notice the throat. What is the name of that section behind your mouth? The pharynx. Specifically the what?
Oropharynx.
Oropharynx. From the oropharynx, we are going to go into the next part of the pharynx right before we go to the esophagus. And what would that be? laryngopharynx. Notice we did not put the nasopharynx because we're assuming that there shouldn't be any food that's going to be going through the nose, right? Okay, so review your two parts of the pharynx. They're going to be right here. That's going to be your oropharynx followed by your laryngopharynx. Then we go into the esophagus. Then with the esophagus into the stomach. A lot of stuff is going to be happening in here. Then the small intestine, then the large intestine, then the rectum and the anal canal, okay? So that's just kind of an overview of the alimentary canal. Here's your accessory digestive organs. There's the blank and the blank, which are going to be in contact with the food, at least where the mouth is concerned. What are the two accessory digestive organs that we can put in this blank?
Teeth and tongue.
Which one?
Teeth and tongue.
The teeth and the tongue. Okay, very good. And then we've got the salivary glands that are also going to be contributing to that. And then we have the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. These are positioned here very intentionally. Liver, gallbladder, and pancreas, I want you to think of them as being closely associated with the small intestine. We're not really going to be using these until we get to the small intestine. That's why. Because they are going to secrete something that goes into the small intestine in order for our carbohydrates, proteins, and fats to be digested. And then I have the stars here, connected to the alimentary canal via ducts. So what does that mean? The enzymes that are going to be coming from here and the bile that is going to be coming from here, those are examples of what we call exocrine secretions. So that means that they are going to be delivered through passageways, through surfaces, in order for them to contact the food that is in the small intestine. Okay, so that's our big picture. So digestive system is only just talking about just one part of digestion when we look at the word. But really what the whole process of digestion is going to involve the following. And at any point, okay, if you want me to slow down and repeat anything, please let me know, and I will repeat something because I am going to go a little bit fast. All right? So, these are the 5 digestive processes. First, you actually have to take in the food. When you take in the food, that's what we call ingestion. Then you've got to move the food along. When you move the food along, we're going to call that peristalsis. Peristalsis. Propulsion. Propulsion. Okay? That's going to include 2 things, peristalsis and something called segmentation. Segmentation does not really move it all that much, but peristalsis is going to be the main term we're going to be using when we look at the actual movement of the food, which is called propulsion. We propel it forward. That's why. This is what your discussion post is going to be about. This part, number 3, digestion. There's mechanical digestion, and then there's chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion literally means chewing, mixing, grinding, breaking down the foodstuffs by mechanical means. That is mechanical digestion. Chemical digestion means that you actually have to use an enzyme in order to chemically break it down. So, what is our focus for our discussion? Digestion, but mainly the chemical digestion part, which is the one that I want you to take note of. So by the end of today, you should be able to kind of take enough notes for your discussion post already for it to be ready to go, okay? Then after we digest it, it's gonna be useless to us unless we can absorb it. So we have to absorb whatever the smallest pieces are, and we need to absorb nutrients and water. Water we're not going to talk about all too much. This doesn't really become an issue until we get to the large intestines where a lot of our water gets to be absorbed. But what we really want, most importantly, we want the nutrients. Nutrients in the form of what? Glucose, amino acids, fatty acids. That's what we want. After all is said and done, we're trying to digest these large foodstuffs into something our cells can actually use. Those would be the nutrients. And so we gotta absorb all of that and absorb some water so that finally what is left over of it is going to go from being some soupy mix to something that is more semi-solid. And so when we get rid of that semi-solid waste, that's what we're gonna call defecation. That's at the very end, okay? See the 5 digestive processes? This really only happens at the mouth. This really only happens at the rectum and the anal canal. Everything else in here, especially, is gonna alternate. And mainly it's going to be in the small intestine. That's where most of that's going to happen, okay? Right? So let's go into that alimentary canal wall. This is something I want you to be able to understand for lab. So we're not gonna spend a lot of time on this. But I would like you to help me fill in the blanks, okay? And they're going to be filled in with certain tissue types. If we were to look at the layers from what's actually facing the food to the outermost layer of that canal, it would be in this order. In lab, I do it in reverse. So we have to really understand what superficial versus deep means. This ends up being the most superficial. This ends up being the deepest. What is the layer that will be in direct contact with food? Is it going to be the serosa or is it going to be the mucosa? The mucosa is the one in direct contact with food. So when we go superficial to deep, that really means if you were given, let's say, an intestine and you had to cut through it, what is going to be the first layer that you will cut? It's going to be the serosa is the first layer that you will cut, and then you'll work your way in. So let's fill in the blanks. Let's go actually from superficial to deep. There is a layer in here called the muscularis, or simply the muscularis externa. So you can say externa. What type of muscle do you think that layer is made out of? This is your best example of smooth muscle. Okay, moving on. And by the way, whatever you don't get from here, you will get in lab, or you've already gotten in lab. What should I put here? What is the general tissue type that's actually going to be facing the food? Epithelium should be here. Epithelium. That epithelium is going to change. It's going to start out one way in the mouth. It's going to be like that in the esophagus. Then it starts to change in the stomach and the small intestine and the large intestine. And by the time we reach the anal canal, that epithelium has changed once again. So this is the part that's really going to change it. You would have to pay attention to histologically for lab. Because the lamina propria, muscularis, mucosa, submucosa, muscularis will pretty much be consistent throughout. It's just that epithelium is going to start to change. So know your 4 layers of that alimentary canal. With the alimentary canal, we start with the mouth. There isn't a lot that's happening in here. The mouth is also known as the oral cavity. What kind of mucosal layer do you think this is going to be including? Okay, what kind of epithelial type is most appropriate for the oral cavity, everybody? Knowing that it is facing the outside and this is the very first place that you're going to be introducing your food. What's this one? What's the best one for this? You need something with protection. What is your protective epithelium, everybody? Stratified? Stratified? Give me a shape. Squamous. Stratified, squamous. Keratinized or non-keratinized? Non-keratinized, because we don't risk water loss. Why? It's entirely bathed in saliva. So non-keratinized, stratified, squamous, okay, for protection. Around here, also what's helping with the digestion, the mechanical digestion of food, know a little bit about the lips and the cheeks. The lips and the cheeks are formed from skeletal muscle. We went over some of those muscles that are responsible for chewing a long time ago, okay? And then that's our mouth. We're gonna open up our mouth now. In order for you to study this part of the anatomy, what I encourage you to do is open your mouth and look in the mirror and start naming things that you know. I don't want you to identify every single piece that is on here. I want you just to identify what is on this side, okay? Let's start off with the vestibule. The vestibule is the area that is just anterior to the teeth. When you pull your lips down, that is that area, that's the vestibule. Where typically cold sores show up or canker sores, okay? We hate it when that happens, okay? That's the vestibule. That is right here. We have what are called the frenula. These are these mucosal folds. A singular is the frenulum. We have the labial and we have the lingual frenula. And so when you look at your picture, when you look at the mirror and you kind of pull this down into the vestibule, you're going to notice that there is this mucosal band that is kind of in the center. That's the one that's associated with the lips, so we're going to call those the labial frenula. The lingual frenula, or the lingual frenulum, because there's going to be a single one. Lingual is in reference to the tongue. So when you lift up your tongue, right about here, it's that little band that's there. That's what's called the lingual frenulum. I'm sorry?
You want us to know the inferior and superior ones of this?
No. No. Just know just generally the labial frenula and the lingual frenulum.
Can you point out the lingual frenulum?
The lingual frenulum is the speck. When you lift up your tongue, and then you see there's a mucosal line that's in the center, that's attaching your tongue to the bottom of your mouth.
That's the lingual?
This is the lingual frenulum.
Where's the labial?
Labial is that up there and that down there. What you can also view from here are the blank palate and the blank palate. What should be in those spaces?
Soft and hard.
Hard and soft. The hard palate is made up of bone, of course. We've got two bones that are going to be making up that hard palate. If you remember or recall what they are, what are the two bones that make up the hard palate? One of them sounds just like palate. Palatine is one, and what was the one that was anterior? This bone over here. What's this bone? The maxilla. So the maxilla and the palatine bones were the ones that made up that hard palate, and then we've got the soft palate. The soft palate, most notable feature from that soft palate that I want you to recognize is the one that is kind of hanging down there. This is an extension of that soft palate. So the soft palate, most notable feature that I want you to know is the uvula. And what the uvula does is that when you swallow, the uvula goes up. So when the epiglottis comes down and covers our larynx at the same time, our uvula is supposed to go up to prevent any food from going into our nasopharynx. So that's the job of the uvula, and that uvula is part of the soft palate. Lastly, when you look in the inside of your oral cavity, you'll notice that there are some arches. There's one that is in the front, there's one that is in the back. Palatoglossal versus palatopharyngeal. Palatoglossal, glossal is also in reference to the tongue, so this is the one that is in the front because it's closer to the tongue. This is the one that is closer to the back, which is why this is palatopharyngeal, because the pharyngeal is back there, the pharynx is over there. So the one in the front is palatoglossal, the one in the back, that is palatopharyngeal. That's our anatomy of the mouth. So just how much I want you to know of it, okay? Don't memorize everything that's on here. You should just know these features. Moving on. Now we're going to go into our first accessory organs, starting with the tongue, then we're going to go into the teeth. We've got the tongue and the tongue papilla. The tongue papilla are the bumps that you actually see on that tongue. However, when you look at those bumps on the tongue, they are not the same as taste buds. This is something that we kind of talked about already back when we were looking at the senses. The bumps that are there are the papilla, and they may not necessarily contain taste buds. So the three types of papilla that I want you to know, okay? Filiform papilla. This is the majority that you see when you open your mouth and look at your tongue. Filiform papilla gives it this quality of being a rough tongue. So these filiform papilla do not contain taste buds. So the majority of the bumps that you see on your tongue do not contain taste buds. So why even have them? They help you hold on to your food. That's really what the filiform papilla are going to do. Hold on to your food so that we can chew it, we can mix it around, have it spend a little time in our mouth so it doesn't slide all the way down and we don't swallow it right away. Okay, that's our filiform papilla. Then hanging out among the filiform papilla, on occasion, you have the ones that are typically going to be the little white dots. So take a look at your tongue next time, stare at it, look at it, you'll see the majority is that, and then on occasion, it's going to be kind of spattered along with this fungiform papilla. These are located throughout. These do contain taste buds. These do contain taste buds. They're the ones that are kind of white, they're a little bit larger, and they're among that sea of the filiform one. Okay, the third set of papilla that I want you to know are what are called the circumvallate or just simply vallate papilla. V-shaped row in the back, that's this right here. This definitely has taste buds. In fact, it has some of the highest concentration of taste buds there are. So if you've ever taken a really bitter pill and then you kind of put it on your tongue and you're like, oh, that's not so bad. And then you go ahead and you swallow it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's awful. The reason why is because it has hit up these taste buds back here, okay? So the circumvallate papilla have the highest concentration of taste buds, especially for the taste of bitterness. They are all the way back there. And those are the three types I want you to know. Your first macromolecule that will be chemically digested, or one of the first. Okay, go ahead and put under the fats column, lingual lipase. Lingual lipase is an enzyme that is going to be secreted at the base of the tongue that is going to digest or start digesting our fats. Anytime you see the word lipase, folks, by the way, that means that it is an enzyme that is going to be digesting fats. So, fats would be right there. Let's move on to the teeth. We have a total of 32 teeth. Because we looked at it in quadrants. Each quadrant has this set of 8. And just like you have many different tools in your kitchen drawer in order for you to slice, to dice, to mash, whatever you are making, whatever you are preparing, we've got our own set of little kitchen tools in here. That's what we call our teeth. And this is what is going to mechanically digest our food, not chemically digest our food, because it's not secreting any enzymes. And so these are the following. I'm going to point them out to you, which is which. We're going to start out with, every set has 2 incisors for slicing. That and that. These are the ones the most anterior. These are the ones, if you look at the shape of your teeth, they look like they can slice. These are your incisors. You've got 1 canine. The third one down should be a little bit sharper than the first 2. That's going to be the canine. This is for tearing. Then you've got 2 premolars, and then you have 3 molars, okay? So these are your incisors, this is your canine, 2 premolars, and 3 molars. Which one of these is the one that is also known as your wisdom teeth? Which one? Which is the one, the reason why it's called wisdom teeth, by the way, is because it's the last one that's going to emerge and become finalized. Which one is it? I hope it's not that one, right? Which one is it? The third molar is your wisdom tooth. That is the last one to emerge. That's why it's considered the wisdom tooth. Okay? And then we get it removed if it starts to impact the other molars in the way, typically. And that's our wisdom tooth, the third molar. 3 regions to every single tooth. If we pulled out just one of them, we've got your crown, which is the one that you can actually see, the neck, which is really close to the gums, and then you've got the root, which is the surface that you can't see, the part that you cannot see. It's got some dental enamel, and this is what is the outer mineral layer that we try to keep maintaining every time we go to the dentist and we go for a teeth cleaning. That's going to be our enamel. The inside of the tooth is made up of dentin. This is like enamel, but a little bit more collagen. It is like bone, but actually stronger and denser than bone. But this is going to be our dentin. Then you've got, in this inner core, we have the pulp cavity, which contains vessels and nerves. When somebody gets a root canal, this is the one that we're going to try to get filled. Okay? So we got enamel, dentin, pulp cavity. It is held in place by what's called the periodontal ligaments. Right here, we have this joint that's called a gumbosis, if you remember the term gumbosis. Or this little space is also known as an alveolus, like the alveolar margin when we're looking at our teeth, when we're looking at our skull. right? It's embedded in here, and then the last feature here that I want you to be familiar with is, of course, that gingiva, which is also known as the gum. Moving on, we've got the salivary glands now. Salivary glands, we still have not yet left the mouth. We haven't even gone to the esophagus yet. Okay, our other accessory organs here, the salivary glands. Salivary glands, we have 3 salivary glands. Parotid, next to the ear. Submandibular, under the mandible. Where do you think the sublingual glands are? Under the tongue, under the tongue. So we've got our sublingual gland right about there. So we've got submandibular, sublingual, parotid, next to ear. Otid means ear, parotid, those are the 3 salivary glands. Go ahead and put underneath your carbohydrate column. First one over here for your starches, salivary amylase. See the term amylase? You should be thinking starch. Breaks down starch. Okay, have a question? That's cool. Okay, secretes saliva. What is in that saliva versus just salivary amylase? Okay, there's other stuff in it. Water, ions, mucus, and of course, enzymes. Salivary amylase for your starches, and also some antibacterial enzymes. Because of your saliva, did you know that your mouth is actually one of the cleanest parts of your body? Because of your saliva, okay? Next time you spit, stare at your saliva, okay? Look at it, look at what's in it, study what's in it. This is probably something that you would have to try to remember, right? And think about, okay, so which carbohydrate or which macromolecule am I trying to digest with this one thing, this ball of spit in my hand, okay? You should be thinking salivary amylase. Going down the chute now. Everybody, I want you to, if you brought a snack today, now would be a good time to eat that snack and to really think about it. Okay? Think about it. Think about where it's going. Think about what's in that snack. Because now, down the chute we go. Oropharynx and laryngopharynx, because food will be in contact, everybody, what's going to be your epithelium that is best for protection? I want to hear everyone say it now. Stratified squamous, yay! Don't forget, there's the epiglottis over there too. The epiglottis has to close that entrance to the respiratory tract. We don't want any of the food going in there. So make sure that you read that, right? Everyone do a very hard swallow. Now we're going to the esophagus. What might have happened also is before you finish chewing your food, if you were super, super, super hungry, let me know if this has happened to you. You didn't truly chew your food and then you went ahead and you swallowed it and you felt that big bolus of food going like, oh my gosh, ow, ow, ow. Okay, what you're feeling right now is what's going through your esophagus, at least in the very first part. The first part is actually voluntary, the later part is going to be involuntary. So, go with our esophagus. First off, there is no digestion going on in here. None. None. It's a tube. It's a muscular tube. And then we're going to swallow our bolus of food. It comes down. This is how we're going to end up going to the stomach. And when it goes to the stomach, right before it goes to the stomach, it has to go through an opening in the diaphragm called the esophageal hiatus. So when somebody has what's called a hiatal hernia, and they have problems with swallowing, it's because a piece of their esophagus is kind of stuck in that hole in the center of that diaphragm. Makes it very, very uncomfortable, not painful. So that is what we mean by a hiatal hernia, when a piece of the esophagus gets stuck in there. But that's the opening, the diaphragm, as we are crossing into the abdominal cavity. We're going to meet the stomach at the end of that at what's called the cardiac sphincter. The cardiac sphincter is a little muscular sphincter at the end of that esophagus. The reason why we have to have sphincters is you're going to see every time in that alimentary canal, when you move from one place to another, there's typically going to be a sphincter there. because we want to try to prevent any kind of backflow. We want to make sure that whatever gets introduced into that next part does not go backwards. And so you're going to see sphincters here and there in order to regulate what can go forward. And this is the very first one, the cardiac sphincter. Typically when someone has gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, GERD, okay, this is like having heartburn chronically. Heartburn, you can have that occasionally. Why do they call it heartburn? Because it's around the level of where your heart is. Why do you think they call it the cardiac sphincter? Because it's around the area where your heart is. And so when we say heartburn, typically it's because some of the contents of the stomach have gone a little bit backwards into the esophagus, and it feels like it's burning because of the acid that is there. Now, if you get that chronically, you can be diagnosed with GERD. This is like heartburn, but chronically, okay? And that is typically because the cardiac sphincter is not quite closing in the way that it should be closing, allowing for acidic contents to go upward, right? If you've ever vomited, okay, what do you notice about that vomit, right? What does it feel like? It feels like it's burning. Why? Those are acidic contents when we go into the next place. Let's fill up this last part, and then we are going to move on finally to the stomach. And again, I know I'm going super fast. I just want to make sure that you've got that information. Okay, blank epithelium. Then you've got muscularis externa, made of both skeletal muscle early on, as I said, the first part is voluntary. And then smooth muscle later on, as we get closer to the stomach. What is the most appropriate epithelium that is here still, knowing that there's no enzymatic digestion that's happening? Should still be stratified squamous. When do we start to switch our epithelium, folks?
Stomach.
There you go. All right. Curvatures, rugae, and the regions. This one we went over in lab, so I'm going to skip this. I'm going to leave this to you, okay, to be able to look at. But I'm going to give you a little bit more of what digestive processes we see here. So far, what's on your checklist? We've got something for carbs already, right? What was the thing for carbs that we started out with? Salivary amylase, okay? So that was early on when we were in the mouth. Okay, we've got something for fats already, right? We're gonna start with some fats. What did we start with that one? Lingual, everybody? Lipase, okay? So who's left? Who hasn't been touched yet? Proteins, okay, proteins is gonna be the big star over here. So, what do we have, right? This is not just a storage reservoir, which it is, that's the function of the stomach. Mostly digestion, very little absorption. So as one of our digestive processes, absorption, which organ did I say the majority of that absorption was going to happen? Was it the mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine? Small intestine is where pretty much all of your absorption has to be happening, okay? Your nutrient absorption. So there shouldn't be that much absorption in here. If there is any absorption, we're talking real minor here. Water can be absorbed in the stomach. Alcohol can be absorbed in the stomach. Electrolytes and some drugs can be absorbed in the stomach, such as aspirin, acetaminophen, okay? So this is why when they say, okay, if you were to drink any alcohol, make sure that you eat something first, because this is one of those that can be readily absorbed in the stomach. Also, anything that gets absorbed from here on out with the stomach and everything further from that doesn't go into the general circulation. Where does all of that stuff end up first? Which organ do all of those absorbed materials need to make a pit stop to? The liver, which is why they tell you, don't drink too much and don't take too much Tylenol. Why? Who's gonna target that? Where are they targeting? They're gonna go straight to the liver, whatever comes from here. Okay? All right, mostly digestion, little absorption. Anything that is absorbed is really what I want you to know on this list, not a lot. But what exactly is going to be digested here? Which one? Proteins is the big one. So digestion of proteins by the enzyme called pepsin. Pepsin is released by the epithelium of the stomach. We'll talk about which epithelium we're talking about, which cells, because there are going to be specific cells that histologically you should be able to understand exist in these structures called glands, gastric glands. Anything that says the word gastric, 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 you should be thinking stomach. So gastric is associated with stomach, with just the stomach, not the small intestine, not the large intestine, not the esophagus. Gastric is stomach. And so when we're kind of mixing all of our food in here, it's going to turn liquefied into this soupy mix, this acidic mix. And that acidic mix is called chyme. And that chyme is going to be slowly released into the small intestine, little by little by little. So that means that if there was the cardiac sphincter that was up here, there better be another sphincter over here. We don't want any of this to go backwards. We also don't want all of the chyme coming into the small intestine all at once. So every time we go from one organ to the next, it's expected we have to have some kind of regulatory sphincter that's there. So let's continue on with the stomach just a little bit more microscopically. In this one, I want you to spend some time in. This is where a lot of heavy enzymatic digestion is going to happen. So let's fill out a few things first. Okay, this represents the 4 layers of the alimentary canal. Let's go with superficial to deep. What was the name of the outermost one? Starts with an S. This is the serosa. What is this layer over here, deep to the serosa? It is made up of smooth muscle. What do you call this one? Especially if you attended Thursday's lab. What do we call this one? Muscularis externa. Most places of the alimentary canal, we have 2 sheets of smooth muscle in a circular arrangement and a longitudinal arrangement. In the stomach, we have a 3rd arrangement, and that's called the oblique layer, because of the amount of mixing that the stomach has to do. Okay, deep to the muscularis externa, what do we have now? What is this layer? Submucosa. This is the submucosa. And if this is the submucosa, then what is this? Under the mucosa. So this is the mucosa. This is the one that's in contact with the chyme. So we'll focus on that green, that mucosa, because this is when it gets a little bit more complex. So notice this part is the green, and then I have this as green, and that's intentional. Okay, so the very top, facing our food, of course you've got some surface epithelium. Your surface epithelium is generally simple columnar epithelium. We've switched from stratified squamous and we've gone into simple columnar. And some mucus cells. Then we're gonna direct our attention to these little holes. Those holes are what we call the gastric pits. Those gastric pits are going to go deep into the lamina propria. So all of this area, do you see this that I'm kind of pointing out over here? That area of the mucosa is called the lamina propria. And then so you've got these glands that are going real deep into the lamina propria, and these glands are what we call the gastric glands. The gastric glands. These are the following cells that exist in the gastric gland. I want you to know these cells and what they secrete. Histologically, I'm not going to ask you which is the mucus cell, what is the parietal cell, what is the chief cell. You should know of the existence of these 4 cells. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mucus neck cells are pretty straightforward. What they do is they secrete mucus. The parietal cells and the chief cells have to work together. The parietal cells secrete the acid, hydrochloric acid. and something that is essential to blood synthesis called intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is not a digestive enzyme. It allows for you to absorb vitamin B12. This function is actually more important than its ability to make acid. If you do not have vitamin B12, you cannot make hemoglobin. If you cannot make hemoglobin, you cannot make blood cells. That's what your parietal cells are going to do. One way to remember parietal cells and what they do? Parietal cells start with a P, which also means pH. This is what lowers the pH in the stomach. Also what we need acid for, this is acid, hydrochloric acid. We need the acid to activate this enzyme called pepsinogen. The chief cells secrete pepsinogen. So this makes pepsinogen. The acid converts the pepsinogen into something active called pepsin. Why does it need to be activated into pepsin? It's because the pepsinogen, if it were secreted in the active form, we can actually digest our proteins that belong to the surface of our stomach. We do not want to digest our own stomach, right? So that means anything that is involved with protein actually needs to be secreted as an inactive form. So this is for protein. Put that under your protein column. And who secretes that? Your chief cells secrete that. And then one more over here, one more enzyme. Gastric lipase, also from the chief cells. Just by the name, what column should that go under? Which column should that go under? Carbs, proteins, or fats? Gastric lipase, that means this is lipase from the stomach. Fats, this goes under fats. There is one hormone I want you to know from this, one hormone. In order for these to be active, we need a hormone. So we do have what are called enteroendocrine cells, which are also going to exist in here. And they are going to secrete a hormone called gastrin. The job of gastrin is to stimulate the parietal cells and chief cells so that they can secrete their respective things. Okay? That's our stomach. So if we can eat tripe, why don't we digest our own stomach? How many of you have had tripe before? Okay, there's usually at least a couple of people in the room who've had tripe. What is tripe? That's animal stomach. That's what that is. If we can eat that, how come we don't digest our own stomach? Well, first off, our mucus cells are doing their job. They are making mucus. It's an alkaline mucus to help protect that layer from that acidic environment. Secondly, our simple columnar cells have a lot of tight junctions between them to prevent any seepage of that acidic chyme from going into the interstitial fluid. Then lastly, the stomach mucosa that you have now, in about a week's time, it's going to be completely replaced. So 3 to 6 day lifespan. This is how we don't end up digesting our own stomach. Okay. When we come back from our break, let's take a little bit of a break, okay? And then I can talk about this probably at the end. This is a little very interesting story about how the digestion of the stomach was discovered. Okay, it's a little bit of a disturbing story, and we like the anatomical disturbing stories sometimes. Those are the ones that kind of stick. Okay, why don't we take a small break, and then when we come back, I'll talk about this, and then we're finally going to go into this moment.